Kyle here from All Media Reviews, here to do another Albums of the Year series, now in 1974. I made a mistake about something about Elton John or something on the last one. My apologies. You know, you're saying a million things and stuff comes. I did find some records that I would have liked to have shown that I didn't. I found my copy of Gumma from Pink Floyd. This was actually issued in 73, but, you know, the release date was like 69. Would have been on the 69 list. And I found my copy of Search for the Lost Chord from the Moody Blues from, would have been 70? Maybe, anyway. You know, I've misplaced a lot of stuff. I've found a lot of stuff that I did misplace, but there's still, obviously, a lot of stuff that I either have lost or have misplaced still. So, alright, I'm going to go through 1974 here. This is a pretty long list. I'll go through this as quick as possible. But, number 32, Marvin Hamlish's soundtrack to the Sting soundtrack. And that has his version of The Entertainer. Scott Joplin, I believe, composed The Entertainer. But I was talking to my friend John years ago, and it's like, you know, it was Marvin Hamlish. It's like, but no, it wasn't originally written by that theme, that motif done. And, you know, people, a lot of piano students learn. Anyway, from the Sting soundtrack, the movie with Robert Redford, and I can't remember if it was Paul Newman or not, you know, if that was Billy, you know, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. I don't know if they both were in that, but, you know, I know there's a Redford movie. Anyway, that was 74. Number 31, Jethro Tull's War Child. Oddly enough, I've never gotten that into this record, but as much as I adore the records, the two records that came, really the three records that came before it, and then at least the 3 or 4 records that followed it, well, it's hit and miss. They're kind of hit and miss. They weren't as consistent record to record, but I know a lot of people that love War Child. The title track, Only Solitaire, that's just like a, you know, little ditty. I mean, yeah, it didn't really have any, like, recognizable tunes. Skating Away on the Thin Ice of the New Day. Yeah, I mean, it's not proggy. It was like the complete opposite of prog. Even though it's labeled as progressive rock on Rate Your Music. But anyway, that's number 31. Number 30, Stanley Clarke's, in effect, his debut album. It's, you know, he would go on to do a couple other records I like more. But Stanley Clarke from Return to Forever. At this point, Return to Forever was still kind of in limbo on where they would go. But actually didn't show Children of Forever because I've never gotten around to listen to that. But this came out the year after, and I've never actually picked it up. I've seen it. But actually it says I have it on vinyl, but I don't have it. I couldn't find it in here at least. I've got Children of Forever, but my actual Stanley Clarke collection only includes that and not, even though I've listed. Well, I've also got, of course, the one I'll show later, but yeah. So this should have been on my 73 list probably, but I haven't spent enough time with it to even rank it or, you know. So anyway, that I have, you know, his debut album, which has the Life Suite, or not his second album, the self-titled album, closes out the second side. But yeah, it's a lot of jams. A piece called Power, Vulcan Princess, which is weird because Return to Forever do Vulcan Worlds. I don't know if there's a connection between those two. He also had Jan Hammer and Tony Williams and Bill Connors on this, so it was a lot of people he had been playing with, a lot of the fusion guys. That's kind of the nature of jazz, and jazz at the time in the 70s, of course, so wearing my Return to Forever shirt today. Number 29, Sparks, Kimono My House, which might be the one with This Town Isn't Big Enough, the two of us. Sparks are a band. I like the documentary I saw a few years ago. Yeah, it's considered kind of their most, you know, that they put out 2 records in 74. That and Propaganda. Yeah, this Town Ain't Big Enough for the both of us. That's their most well-known hit. But yeah, I don't know it that well. I know that song, of course, so that's why I put it down at number 29. 28, German progressive rock band that resembled ELP, Triumvirate, Illusions on a Double Dimple. They're most well-known. Number 27, Herbie Hancock's Thrust, following, you know, Headhunters. I've listened to this, you know, I've seen it, I haven't picked it up. I've seen it at the store. I almost bought it once. The condition of the vinyl I bought, they had, I think it was at Half Price Books a few years ago, wasn't the best, but it's not as good as Headhunters, but it's close. I remember liking it a fair amount when I went onto Spotify and checked it out. So, but you know, again, familiarity. So then at 26, I have Sparks' album Propaganda, again, Sparks, which, you know, it's like splitting hairs between the two records by a lot of people's taste. You know, it's watching that documentary. The 70s stuff is sort of the peak Sparks stuff. You know, Larry, you know, the Canadian Submuffin probably could speak more to that, but you know, they were an interesting band that doing the glam rock, you know, with some art rock, prog, and you know, punk and some other styles. I like their hybrid of styles, but I don't know if there's any like like their most well-known singles on this. But again, this record came out the same year as Kimono My House, and the track was it Never Turn Your Back on Mother Earth, and Talents in His NASA. So those are the two singles on it, the two A-side singles. So number 26, number 25, Deep Purple's Burn. You know, I think this is after. This is the first album after the Mark II lineup kind of transition, and it has Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale. I believe this is the first record. Yeah, and I've downloaded this, so you know it has the title track. And that's kind of the most well known. I mean, I spent very much less time with this album than I have with the Mark II stuff, but you know, I mean, it's a bolded record, so people love it on Rate Your Music, so I had to go on my list somewhere. Anyway, which doesn't make sense why I wouldn't put Children of Forever on my 73 list, but I made these lists a couple years ago. I haven't updated them, that's in fairness. Number 24, Frank Zappa's Apostrophe. You know, again, Zappa's an artist that I've always had to pick my spots with. I think this is the one that, you know, has the lyrics, "Don't eat the yellow snow." And again, I mean, and something about pancakes. He's got an album that has a song that talks about pancakes. Yeah, "Don't Eat the Yellow Snow" is the first track on this record, and I again with Zappa, I gravitate more, other than Hot Rats, more of his individual tracks, because it's like intermittent jokes that just are, it's very, you know, there's levity and the sort of dark humor that don't really, or the gross humor that don't always work for me. Stinkfoot, I think, is one of the other kind of go-tos on this album, but I don't remember why I sampled this record as opposed to some of his others. He's got like 60 albums, but with a title like Apostrophe, it made me more curious. Yeah, St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast. So, it's not a bad record in the Zappa catalog, but again, it's not really saying a ton for my taste. So, all right, the next one I have the first physical copy to show. I have Camel's. This is the crappy cover. I don't have the classic cigarette, Camel's Mirage, which I said my piece a bit about Camel. It's like I've never gotten fully into them. They always are so light, but I mean, I did pick this up. I paid $6 for it. Yeah, I don't remember paying that much for it, but this has the Lady Fantasy Suite on side 2, which kind of is the highlight from memory. But yeah, I mean, Camel's Mirage at number 20, whatever this 23 is about right for me. So number 22, 22, yeah. Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark, which, having listened to Blue and that album, it has Help Me. That's probably the most well-known track. I like Court and Spark a little more than Blue, even though Blue's probably more renowned. I think, and even though this, again, wasn't the Jocko period with Joni Mitchell, but it just is kind of less is more. More of less is more, and I don't know. I think she wasn't going for hits as much as going for hits, but she didn't get known for like the songs, like the recognizable, tracks that she did on Blue. But it's interesting how this record, in some respects, is rated higher. But yeah, I mean, she was diving more into jazz on this record. But I mean, it was years ago I got this from the library. It has Joe Sample. It has a really interesting cast of, it doesn't have, well, not Jocko, Larry Carlton, Jose Feliciano, Robbie Robertson from the band. So a good roster. David Crosby and Graham Nash show up on it. Cheech and Chong even. So there's more charm to Court and Spark to me than Blue. It's more uplifting, I guess is the better way to put it. Anyway, that's 22. 21, Pretzel Logic from Steely Dan. Again, Steely Dan's not a band that I'm like obsessed with. I've always had the Decade compilation growing up. I got that. But I know they had their kind of peak period with Asia, and in the mid '70s they were really renowned. It has Ricky Don't Lose That Number is probably the most well-known song on it. The title track is pretty recognizable. Night by Night, jazz pop, and this is, they were doing jazz pop, like, it wasn't jazz fusion, but you can tell they were probably fans of the fusion stuff of, like, Weather Report and Mahavishnu Orchestra and Miles Davis at the time, those guys, Walter Becker and Donald Fagen. But, yeah, Pretzel Logic, not super high, but 21, that's suitable. Number 20, Gentle Giant's The Power and the Glory, an album that I bought, recommended from a friend of mine who had this. This was his favorite Gentle Giant record. And again, I bought it. I've listened to it a few times, but, it was years ago the last time I listened to it. I like the artwork. I mean, the art is probably the most interesting artwork. Most of the Gentle Giant records have, non-traditional artwork. Not all of them, but I mean, the way that this is designed, like a card or whatever, like a King of Spades or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Death by Unicorn, and doing his list, and he's got the Gentle Giant albums really high, and the whole Kevin Gilbert thing with Gentle Giant. Someday, maybe they will finally click with me. It happened with Jethro Tull at one point, and I'll become obsessed with them, and so this is probably kind of low for this album, but as it is, number 20 I think is fair. We played at least one or two of these tracks on the radio, I remember, back in the day on KFAI, so I think of this record as sort of, one of the more essential Gentle Giant records, up beyond maybe Octopus. So, let's see here, number 19, okay, which is an album I just revisited yesterday, Stevie Wonder's Fulfillingness First Finale, and while I can say that this record among the 70s Stevie Wonder, the early to mid 70s, is not I would put it like last among that 4 or 5 album run he did. It still got some good stuff on. The second half is better than the first half, which is interesting. I mean, there's a couple of these songs, they sound kind of like variations on some other songs he did. So a lot of ballads on it, but just having revisited it yesterday, I remember getting it from the library. It's the one that, the name, Fulfillingness First Finale doesn't really roll off the tongue like Talking Book or, Songs in the Key of Life, but They Won't Go When I Go, Bird of Beauty, and Please Don't Go. Please Don't Go is definitely a favorite. You Haven't Done Nothing is kind of catchy and energetic, but, Heaven is 10 Zillion Light Years Away, Smile Please. They're decent songs, but I can definitely say, well, Stevie Wonder has done music that I think is maybe worse. It definitely is among that period his least appreciated record, so that's why it's number 19. Number 18, all right, Weather Report. Finally, first physical copy of a Weather Report record, which is not the Jaco Pastorius. This is the Alfonso Johnson Weather Report. This is their 4th record, Mysterious Traveler, which my favorites are the title track, Nubian Sundance, which is live, and Cucumber Slumber. The drumming is just fantastic on this album. Cucumber Slumber I know from the live and unreleased, which is one of my favorite live albums. Yeah, it's, it's fusion. It's, Joe Zawinul had a very distinct keyboard tone. I would lean toward this over even Heavy Weather, even though Heavy Weather has their most well-known track, in their rendition of Birdland. But anyway, Mysterious Traveler. Number 18. Number 17, El Dorado from ELO. Another band that, while I know their songs, their albums I'm not as familiar, even though, they have some renowned albums. This is the Wizard of Oz album. Can't Get It Out of My Head is probably the biggest hit on here, but I think this is a step up in terms of what they started from. With the early ELO was more stripped down, but just the production values are much better on this record. Is it a concept album about the Wizard of Oz? In some ways, maybe it is. El Dorado, of course, Marilyn wrote the song El Dorado, but yeah, I mean, I don't have it. I almost bought it on vinyl. I thought I actually had, but I meant to buy it on vinyl for a long time, but those mid-70s ELO records especially. So moving on, number 16 among their whatever 80 albums or something. This is the one definitive record, the one I kind of know. It's Phaedra from Tangerine Dream. You know, space, ambient, synth, atmospheric, pop rock, whatever you want to call it. This album doesn't meander as much. It's kind of one flowing thing, and it just, you're going to listen to the whole thing probably if you're going to listen to it. Is it krautrock? Is it, because they were German or whatever, with that whole group of like Amandul and Kraftwerk and everything like that. But yeah, this is my go-to Tangerine Dream album, even though I don't have to be in the right mood to listen to it, of course. I have to be. So that's number 16. Number 15, we finally get Return to Forever after having Stanley Clarke on here. The first album with Al Di Meola, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, well then I skipped, because it was, Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy was 73 with Bill Connors. That's the weird thing, is Bill Connors was only on one record. I have a friend from KFAI who loved the Bill Connors Return to Forever, didn't like the Al Di Meola stuff, but Vulcan Worlds. So, Stanley Clarke had Vulcan Galaxy or whatever, Vulcan Queen. This had Vulcan Worlds. The title track was 2 minutes, and Song to the Pharaoh Kings and the second side, Beyond the Seventh Galaxy. I mean, it's not as famous as a couple of their other records, but I think it's still consistently good. I mean, they were savants, They were Vulcan Worlds was a standard. I know Chick would play himself, so the case here needs to get replaced. Or torn up. But yeah, this is Where Have I Known You Before from Return to Forever, or featuring Chick Corea. It's like, eventually they just got known as Return to Forever. It's like, Chick could not get his name, because Chick's name was bigger than the actual name Return to Forever. So, number 14, the self-titled Rush album, which took, in effect, like 5 to 6 years in the making, because they formed in the late 60s, actually. Said my piece on this many times. It's a great, like, sort of heavy blues rock, Zeppelin influence and Cream influence album. My favorites are What You're Doing. It's always been my favorite on this for a long time. Working Man, of course. Finding My Way. Getty's doing his squealing stuff on that. The dynamics are great on those two songs. There's not a bad song on here. Here again is a blues piece, a little kind of slow, not a ballad exactly. Before and After. In the Mood is okay. Take a Friend. I've always liked every song on this album, but I've never found it to be, because Rush would go on to do different things. But speaking of the day that we found out about Charlie Dominici, John Rutsey, of course, R.I.P. But yeah, the self-titled Rush album, a fun record. It holds up, but it is what it is. It's not become an all-time classic to me, a favorite of mine. So number 13, Todd Rundgren's Utopia's debut album, or Utopia, which features, I think, of pretty much mostly for the second side suite, piece, the 7-minute icon. This is Todd Rundgren doing prog. I have not heard a lot of his other records that he did more of the progressive stuff. Of course, he did a lot of pop stuff too, but this is Utopia itself. The first side's pretty good too. Utopia theme, Freak Parade and Freedom Fighters. But really, if you're gonna buy this, you get your money's worth with with the icon suite, which is just a prog masterpiece. So that's number 13. Number 12. No, I don't have number 12 on physical. I did listen to yesterday, and I remembered why I really like this. In fact, it might be a little low. Is 10cc Sheet Music. Terrific album. They span the gamut. They remind me of a few different bands. Supertramp, Queen, of course, and Sparks. But it's like, I know I've listened to Godly and Cream, and I've always kind of felt like Godly and Cream was a little too out there for me for the most part. But 10cc, they did some, it's almost like comparing Cardiacs to XTC. XTC is weird, but they're not super weird, whereas Cardiacs can be a little too weird, although compared to some stuff, Cardiacs isn't even that weird. You're talking about John Zorn and you name it. But as far as 10cc's sheet music, it's got a lot of highlights. A little bit like Badfinger too. There's a pop element. They were a big influence on Jellyfish. You can tell why Jellyfish talked about them. And a friend of mine used to talk about the band House of Fools, hearing them when he heard hearing 10cc with, and I can understand that sort of acoustic, dynamic, some of the guitar textures. I love the guitar textures. It was very like, I don't know if the thing that Brian May did with Queen. I don't know what it was. It was like that doubling effect with the sustain pedal. But like Baron Samedi, Somewhere in Hollywood, those are both bangers. Somewhere in Hollywood's probably the best track on here, actually. Hotel, Clockwork Creep, the Wall Street Shuffle. This is an awesome record. I mean, 10cc is a band I've slept on like many. It's like Supertramp, ELO, even the early REO Speedwagon and Styx I haven't really listened to that much. I kind of owe it to myself to kind of, not the popular, AOR stuff, but the early stuff. And 10cc is one of those bands that I know they have a lot of good music that I've never heard. They have the one song that was a huge hit, I'm Not in Love, of course, but there was so much more. They used those kind of textures on this album too, that I don't know what they're using, like a pipe or some kind of a tube or something, like a tube amp to get that. It sounds like it's something at a club, like at a dance club. Anyway, so that's number 12. Number 11, I can show this one. Gryphon's Red Queen to Gryphon 3, all instrumental, I believe. Yeah, it's not Canterbury. I made this mistake years ago on a topic that Jeff Wagner was talking about, the Canterbury scene and everything like that. But it sounds like Canterbury music. It sounds very like Renaissance or medieval. But they're used to like was it not piccolo, but like oboe? Is it oboe? Let's see here. What's on here? Crumhorn. Maybe it's just crumb and recorder. Recorder is a huge role in the Gryphon sound, especially on this record. And it's 4 pieces. It's like chop tails or a third from Soft Machine in half, and instead of being 20-minute tracks, they're all 8 to 10-minute tracks or 11-minute tracks. But yeah, Checkmate, that's the one we played on the radio years ago. But I really enjoy Gryphon. I've just, from among the instrumental artists, wouldn't put them with the jazz fusion stuff, but I mean, instrumental bands of the 70s, they're right up there. Just, this is their most well-known, most famous record, too. So, Gryphon's Red Queen to Gryphon 3, number 11. So now we get into the big top 10. 74 was a great year, a deep year, well, compared to other years, maybe not so much, but the debut album from Kansas, which includes Journey from Maribyrnong, that's my go-to on here. Lonely Wind, a couple of the others. Death Mother of Nature's Suite, that's a suite, but renowned painting they took from some museum or something, which, even though this is not the most famous Kansas album, in some ways it's the most famous artwork they ever had. So, something from, like, maybe in the Civil War. This guy was like a giant, it's like 9 feet tall. But yeah, the debut album from Kansas. Record that while they did other things I enjoy more, I've always enjoyed that record. Their first 6 albums, they got another band that had a very consistent run in the 70s. Not so much after that, unfortunately, but for my taste. Number 9, Queen 2, which has my probably second favorite Queen song, March of the Black Queen. It's Queen doing prog. Won't debate that with anyone. I don't know why this is upside down, the track list there, but yeah, I mean, it has Seven Seas Arise, Father to Son, White Queen as it began, Ogre Battle. This is maybe their heaviest record, actually, in some respects. Well, debatable, but it's a step up from the first Queen album for sure. It just came out the next year, but yeah, and the classic cover. But I mean, the March of the Black Queen alone deems it basically be in the top 10. I just adore that track. It's one of the 20 best songs of the 1970s for me, and probably 20 or 30 best prog songs. So number 8, this one's not number 8. Number 8 is Supertramp's Crime of the Century, which the title track I loved. I had not heard this until a couple years ago, and it's got Bloody Well Right, which is the biggest hit on it, but it's pretty much filled with tracks that are can't misses. You don't want to skip anything on this album. And in some ways, it's considered their most prog album, most progressive rock. Dreamer's the other hit. So you had Dreamer and Bloody Well Right. But School, Rudy, it's kind of less is more, but Supertramp, when they're good, they're really bloody good. I love how good they can be. And the title track is a huge highlight. It's only 5.5 minutes, but it seems between that and Rudy that they were doing prog, really. So that's number 8. Number 7, like I said, I need to be versed more in the whole Supertramp catalog. And they don't have that many albums. They only have like 8 albums, but Some point, hopefully, I can claim that, but it's just not enough time, so much music, and yada yada yada. Number 7, Starless and Bible Black from King Crimson, the first of 2 Crimson records on here. It includes The Great Deceiver and The Night Watch. Those are my favorite. And then, the title track. Fracture's pretty badass. Yeah, I think I kind of underrate this record. It's not as famous as, probably even the other 2 sort of second, Mark III or Mark II lineup. The John Wetton era. It's probably probably the least known, the least appreciated, but in some ways I consider it the best, because it's like it's taking what Lark's Tongue they had with Lark's Tongue being very avant-garde and sort of the darkness of Red, and so kind of combining both sides to them. So I can't remember which came out which. I'm pretty sure this came out first because they were a 4-piece, and then part of Red they were a 3-piece. I know. I think Red entirely was a 3-piece, but anyway. Number 6, Renaissance. Turn of the Cards, again with their run of consecutive records after Ashes Are Burning. Running Hard, Things I Don't Understand, I Think of You are all great. Black Flame was another hit, and Mother Russia, the 9-minute and 18-second. This is a fantastic record. It's only like 35 minutes, but every song I wouldn't skip a track on here. Love the cover art. Again, and Terrence Sullivan, I always forget to mention he was the drummer. So, it's the second album in the classic era, the classic lineup, per se. So, Turn of the Cards from Renaissance at number 6. Now we get in the top 5. Sheer Heart Attack from Queen. So, while this doesn't have anything as good as March of the Black Queen, it has a little more consistency in depth. It does have, was it Stone Cold Crazy, which is probably the heaviest Queen song. It's like proto thrash metal or metal, as Death by Unicorn had mentioned. In the Lap of the Gods is one of my other go-tos. Killer Queen's a radio staple, classic rock staple. I've not gotten sick of that song. Bright and Rock. Flick of the Wrist is great. Lily of the Valley. This, In the Lap of the Gods is like a little revisit. It's like a suite. It's not, it kind of was, they were inching from Queen 2 to this. It's like they were just getting better and better. Some people consider this the best Queen album. I don't go that far, but I can recognize why, because in some ways it's less is more and more is more, but its production values are better than on Queen 2 and, of course, the debut, but alright, number 4, some people think might think it's a little bit low, but it's number 4. The Lamb Lies Down Broadway from Genesis, double album, the final album with Peter Gabriel, just several songs that are great. I love it. I love a lot about it. I love what it is trying to do, the ambition, sort of the mystery behind it. From a musical standpoint, of course, Kevin Gilbert covered. That made a big difference when he did the abridged version at Prog Fest in 1994 for the 20th anniversary. But my go-tos are Back in New York City, the Supernatural Anesis. That's one of the best Steve Hackett things he ever did. That guitar solo. Lily White Lilith. The Colony of Slipperman, In the Cage was like the first Genesis song that I actually liked, as opposed to hearing when I heard. But this is the first album that I heard from them, and this was not the best place to start. I wish I would have started with Selling England or maybe even Nursery Crime. But the title track. There's a lot. It's filled with great songs. Some of the sort of more like atmospheric parts that kind of go on a little bit hurt this from being even higher. And why it's not my favorite Genesis album, but I love it so much. I love it a lot more than The Wall from Pink Floyd. And what was that other double album? Quadrophenia. If I was push comes to shove, I probably would go with this over Quadrophenia even. Not by a lot, but anyway. It's a masterpiece. It's properly rated, as opposed to Close to the Edge, which I think is overrated a little bit. This is a properly rated record. People that kiss the ass of this thing and praise it, I get it, because there's so much to unpack, and you can get from this decades later. That's part of what makes this interesting and makes it really a reason to appreciate it and think about it. So, number 3, I talked about it just a minute ago. King Crimson's Red, which of course includes Starless, which is the peak King Crimson by at least this lineup. But this was the trio. I was right. So. The title track, which is like a staple live, and I still like, although I'm a little burnt out on it, a little bit, not too much, but One More Red Nightmare is another favorite on this one, Providence. It's terrific. This is, I think, again, like Queen, they were perfecting their craft, and from this lineup, I think they kind of did with Red, although again, with Starless and Bible Black and with Larkstone Aspic, it's pull them out, roll the dice, pull them out of a hat. But I mean, this is the best sounding of the three. Of course, it didn't include the services of it has David Cross, Mel Collins, and Ian McDonald. But I mean, it was just officially a three-piece band. It only was Wetton, Bruford, and Fripp, of course. So whoever they had, on the previous record, I don't know if it was technically David Cross. They weren't considered an official member at the point they released it. No, it was. So David Cross is just like a guest or something on this. But anyway, getting into semantics. So in the top two, here's a record that I still to this day feel like is needed to be heard by more. This is my favorite Mahavishnu Orchestra related work. Jerry Goodman, Jan Hammer's Like Children, which features country and Eastern music, which is just a banger. Absolute funk. The bass line is just crazy. The little synthesizer lead that Jan Hammer does. It's progressive pop rock in some ways. It's classic rock. It's awesome. But the rest of this record is unbelievably good. Stepping Tones, Earth, Topeka, Full Moon Boogie. It's funky. It's a boogie track, I wonder that walking, piano part that, Mahavishnu did this stuff on Nothing Was to Turn, some of it, and then released some of it on Lost Trident sessions. But even though it's not John McLaughlin, Jerry Goodman figured it out. And then you have Rick Laird, the bass player for Mahavishnu, and it's after Mahavishnu had broken up, but he plays on this. So this is a classic. My friend played a bunch of this on the radio years ago. It was like 20 years ago, and it's like, what in the world am I listening to here? And it floored me. This is one of my top 5 fusion records for sure. Number 2 for 1974, and number 1. The Big Daddy fusion of sorts, Yes going into jazz fusion, Relayer, my favorite Yes record. The Gates of Delirium is an all-out tour de force, fantastic epic. It's my number 1 Yes piece. It's Patrick Moraz is bringing everything in the kitchen sink. The Soon section's gorgeous. The Battle section is just you never get sick of it. It's musicianship at its finest in a lot of ways in the early to mid 70s. And I love To Be Over. It's beautiful, and Sound Chaser is quirky and kind of odd and offbeat and everything, but it still works. It always flows. This record, I couldn't believe when I listened to Tales from Patrick Oceans. I should have listened to this, or I should have listened to this after Fragile. It finally hit me around 2000. When friends were just playing The Gates of Delirium, and Yes had been playing. It's like, what in the world? Why have I not heard this Yes piece? And yeah, this is the peak Yes for me. There's a bunch of other Yes records I love, but this is their best work. So that's it for 1974, an epic year. I'll be going on 1975 at some point here. But anyways, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.